Moving on to bullous pemphigoid, it's again an autoimmune disease. It is due to the binding of autoantibodies to the specific antigens in the lamina lucida of the basement membrane, and it is very self-limiting, lasts for only a few months to 5 years, and it's rarely life-threatening. And it often occurs in conjunction with multiple sclerosis, malignancy, and drug therapy, especially in diabetics. Clinical features: it occurs mostly in over 60 adults in over 60 years of age, and the skin lesions, usually there is a blister on an inflamed base. They do not continue to extend and cause denudation. Oral manifestation occurs in 30 to 50% of cases, which is manifested with small and less painful, non-extensive labial involvement as pemphigus vulgaris. Desquamative gingivitis is another sign of bullous pemphigoid. It is difficult to distinguish from pemphigoid. Again, the diagnosis is based on the clinical presentation and on immunofluorescence, direct immunofluorescence. Moving on to mucous membrane pemphigoid. So it's a chronic autoimmune disease of which the trigger is unknown. The autoantibodies here are directed against the basement membrane zone, and the clinical presentation for mucous membrane pemphigoid is usually there is presence of vesicle and bullae, which are followed by ulceration. It affects multiple intraoral sites, and it usually seen in older adults, and it has a slight female predilection, and the case ratio is generally female to male is 2:1, and ocular lesions are noted in 1/3 of the cases, and proclivity for scarring in ocular, laryngeal, and nasopharyngeal and oropharyngeal tissues are also noticed. We'll find that there is subepithelial cleft formation, and indirect immunofluorescence examination is positive in 80% of the cases, and indirect immunofluorescence examination is usually negative. So in terms of mucous membrane pemphigoid, it is important to note that direct immunofluorescence is the most effective way to laboratory test for mucous membrane, or microscopically test for MMP. Diagnosis is usually with biopsy and direct immunofluorescence examination. Differential diagnosis is generally pemphigus vulgaris, erythema multiforme, erosive lichen planus, lupus erythematosus, and treatment is generally done with topical corticosteroids, systemic prednisolone, or cyclophosphamide, tetracycline, and niacinamide, dapsone are all used in treatment of mucous membrane pemphigoid. Prognosis is generally fair, and because management often becomes difficult due to variable response to corticosteroid by the patient, and also it also requires multiple specialists working on the patient: ophthalmology, ENT, derma, dental, oral medicine specialists. So since it requires so much work and so much and the patient's variability in terms of response to corticosteroid as a treatment of choice, sometimes it tends to become very difficult. So the prognosis is generally fair, but initial key cases and the ones which are generally restricted to the oral cavity generally show a fairly good prognosis, basically. Okay, moving on to single ulcers. To start off with, let us start with a malignant ulcer such as the squamous cell carcinoma, which is the majority of malignant ulcer that is seen, which is approximately 80% in 80% of malignant ulcer cases, and it is related to tobacco and alcohol consumption or usage. In some cases, it can also be associated with virus such as the HPV, human papilloma virus, and it generally occurs as a stepwise progression of genetic alterations, from variating itself from dysplasia to carcinoma. The clinical presentation is usually it is white or red surface alteration. In later stages, it might become with a deep ulceration, indurated ulcer, with elevated margins, and the most common sites are the lateral border of the tongue and the floor of the mouth. Please notice that the lateral border of the tongue and the floor of the mouth are generally declared as the most high risk areas for for any disease formed in that area to be led into a malignant form. They are marked as high risk areas, and lower lip or the vermilion surface are also a common location. In advanced stage disease, it is associated with the limitation of movement. There is trismus, and there is also a lymph node metastasis, that is the submandibular and the cervical lymph node metastasis. Radiographically, you might find erode or the adjacent bone has been eroded or invaded in very later stages. Generally, when it involves the lateral border of the tongue or the lip, you generally do not find any radiographic appearance at all. So in these cases, it doesn't help much. Conclusive will be biopsy, of course, and in terms of understanding the lesion, when it is associated with the bony hard surface in later stages, you might find some erosions or invasions, which we might have to treat later on. And microscopically, it is either well differentiated or moderately differentiated. There is invasive islands of cords of epithelial cells, and differential diagnosis is generally chronic traumatic ulcer, syphilitic ulcer, deep fungal infection, and necrotizing xylometaplasia. And treatment is generally surgical excision is the treatment of choice when it is limited to a soft tissue area, and sometimes it can be combined with radiation therapy, and chemotherapy is also advised. So the current trend is combination therapy, where we do not go for a standalone either surgery or just radiation or just chemo. We go for a combination therapy where we tend to combine depending on the patient's clinical presentations. It can be a combination of either surgery with radiation or radiation with chemo or surgery with chemo. So that depends on the presentation of the lesion. And prognosis generally, stage 1 and stage 2 has generally good prognosis. Stage 3 and stage 4 is generally has a very fair to poor prognosis. Moving on to fungal ulcers due to fungal infection. Let's start with the few of them that are identified: histoplasmosis, blastomycosis, mucormycosis, and aspergillus. And start off with histoplasmosis. The etiology is fungal infection caused by histoplasma capsulatum, and the fungus is endemic to mostly the United States, and to be more specific, Ohio and Mississippi River Valley areas. Transmission is due to spore inhalation, and oral lesions usually occur secondary to pulmonary lesions with hematogenous dissemination. And the clinical presentations are generally general symptoms for histoplasmosis is very mild. Oral lesion associated or generally follows pulmonary lesions. Chronic ulcerations with necrosis, elevated nodular margins, and sometimes it might even resemble a squamous cell carcinoma. On the tongue, a cobblestone ulcer may be noted, and the oral ulcers tend to persist until we address the systemic disease, that is the deep lying fungal infection within the pulmonary region. And diagnosis is generally with the demonstration of organism in biopsy specimen, culture, and serologic demonstration of the antigen or antibodies for histoplasmosis. And differential diagnosis is generally tuberculosis, squamous cell carcinoma, tertiary syphilis. Treatment is in very mild cases, generally we tend to develop immunity, and it tends to heal by itself. But in severe cases, you might require some strong antifungal drugs such as amphotericin B, and other drugs such as ketoconazole, fluconazole, and itraconazole are also used in treatment of histoplasmosis. Prognosis, patient might require spontaneously. It's generally good unless it is associated with some other form of immune suppression condition in the patient. If the patient is immune compromised, then there's a chance that it might become quite severe. Moving on to blastomycosis, the etiology of blastomycosis is again due to para uh, Paracrocodilis brasiliensis. I'm sorry if I'm getting the name wrong. It is quite a lengthy organism, and it is the organism which causes blastomycosis, and transmission is usually by spore inhalation, and the infection, the foci of infection lies in the lungs, the pulmonary area, and all the other areas like skin, mucosa, bone, viscera are all secondary to secondary to pulmonary infection. Clinical presentation, in acute stages, a patient might present with pneumonitis, fever, weight loss, night sweats, and productive cough. In chronic cases, there is granulomatous lesions like in oropharyngeal mucosa, skin, and pulmonary signs mimicking tuberculosis. And then skin and oral mucosal lesions are characterized by verrucous growth, ulceration, and sometimes scarring can also be seen in healed areas. Mucosal lesions sometimes might mimic squamous cell carcinoma ulcer, and and diagnosis is generally done with cytologic and histopathologic examination. Culture of sputum can be done, and differential diagnosis for blastomycosis is generally malignant tumor, tuberculosis, and tertiary syphilis. Treatment is systemic antifungals, oral itraconazole, and prognosis is again depends on the patient's systemic condition. The prognosis might vary. If there is an associated disease, then it might become quite complex and a little challenging to treat. If left untreated, there is a chance that blastomycosis have also proven to be fatal. Moving on to mucormycosis, the etiology is organism of zygomycetin class, that is Rhizopus, Mucorgenera, Absidia organisms tend to cause mucormycosis. It is noted mainly in immunosuppressed individuals and in case of uncontrolled diabetes, which also indirectly contributes to immunosuppression and or delayed healing. Clinical presentation is generally large, irregular, and necrotizing ulcers, and it most commonly involves the palate with concomitant paranasal sinus involvement, enough to perforate through the oral mucosa and to reach the uh, nasal apparatus. And radiographic findings, you will generally find maxillary sinus opacification and irregular sinus wall destruction. Um, Microscopically, you will find tissue necrosis with fungal invasion into the blood vessels, and there is non-septate branching and a broad hyphae of the fungus involved. And diagnosis is generally done with radiographic and microscopic findings in terms of mucormycosis. Please remember, radiographic findings do not apply in histoplasmosis or blastomycosis. In mucormycosis, you use radiographic findings because when it involves uh, the maxillary sinus, there are certain things to look out for. Differential diagnosis is maxillary sinus neoplasia, maxillary sinus aspergillosis, soft tissue infarction, and other deep fungal infections such as histoplasmosis and blastomycosis. And treatment is generally surgical debridement and intravenous antifungal agents such as amphotericin, ketoconazole, and control of the underlying disease process. Prognosis is generally good depending upon the underlying systemic factors for mucormycosis. moving on to traumatic ulcer. So traumatic ulcer etiology. There we have given a here we have listed out a general cause for traumatic ulcer. It generally occurs as a single ulcer, identifiable, and patient might in most cases remember the trauma associated. So it can be mechanical, thermal, or chemical in origin. And generally you can comprise this as accidental due to functional or factious injury. The clinical presentation is generally a tender to very painful ulcer with a low fibrinous center and well-defined margins. And the margins can present with inflammatory or erythematous signs. And microscopically, you might find a fibrinous surface with a mixed inflammatory infiltrate and granulation tissue at the base of the lesion. Diagnosis is generally done patient like I told with history. Patient might mostly remember history of trauma, especially when it comes to electric burns or pizza burns or aspirin burn, or let us say for example oral piercing, or you know ill-fitting processes. Patient will specifically come and tell you that this denture is hurting me. It is like when I put it, it is poking into my skin. It is causing some disturbance. So there are certain conditions where patient will specifically come and tell you this is the reason for my for the painful sore in my mouth. But in some cases patient might not actually realize what has actually caused the ulcer. Some of the easiest thing is a denture cleaner, or biting after a local anesthesia, and sometimes in case of mouthwash with high alcohol contents, phenols, you know, in these, and self-injurious habits. So these are conditions where patient might not be able to correlate or will not remember much about what is causing the disease per se. So history plays a very important role in terms of diagnosing and evaluation of all the associated you know um, let us say for example, if there is a prosthesis involved, evaluation of the prosthesis. If there is an orthodontic involved um, appliance, in evaluation of the orthodontic appliance. So evaluation of the condition, that is basically that falls under the category of examination. So history, examination, and look out for any non-specific histologic findings in terms of traumatic ulcer. Diagnosis for traumatic ulcer is usually aphthous ulcer, neutropenic ulcer, and squamous cell carcinoma, and primary syphilis, which is oral chancre. So treatment is generally with symptomatic treatment. We give a patient topical analgesics, and we also try to advise them to maintain an antiseptic kind of environment with antiseptic mouthwashes, chlorhexidine mouthwashes. The healing generally occurs within 10 days. This depends on the degree of trauma involved. It might vary again, and generally it occurs within 10 days. Prognosis is generally very good with traumatic ulcer. So this brings the conclusion of this particular presentation. I know these oral presentations can sometimes tend to become a little monotonous, and it can be a little tough to follow also. I've already told this in our classes before. I generally do not directly read from the slides. I generally try to cover things that are generally not there on the slides. So take your time, since it's a recorded session. Take your time to listen, and please note down the other points that have actually not been written on the slide, but has been orally delivered. When it comes to the topics within today's presentation, please go through pemphigus vulgaris and mucous membrane pemphigoid without fail. So let us have kind of an Easter egg. I do not know um, how many of you like sit and listen to the entire you know uh, presentation of the class here. So let's just have an hidden Easter egg kind of an assignment here. So it is a little late to Easter, but then like let's have an Easter egg here. So what I want you to do is I want you to write an assignment on or type an assignment on pemphigus vulgaris and mucous membrane pemphigoid. So people who have followed through the lecture, try to please combine the things that are given on the slides, the textbook, and what has been orally told you during the lectures, and compile them together, and just write down all the points related to pemphigus vulgaris and mucous membrane pemphigoid, and a column will be created for you in Google Classroom, and you can do the submission there. Um, Thank you, and take care.